I'd like to take a moment to talk with you about your upcoming outline assignment. Now, I've given you pretty clear directions and a template for you to use to create the outline, so I think you've got a pretty good idea of what it needs to look like. So instead, I want to talk with you about these three questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Which is always an important thing to know. And how. I'll talk about some of the key elements you want to have and highlight some challenges we often face in writing outlines. So first, what? So in putting together an outline, what you are basically doing is creating a detailed skeleton of the argument you're planning to make. And I'm emphasizing detailed because this isn't going to be an outline where you say, I want to say something about this and something about this and something about this. This is going to be a detailed pre-writing outline. So what you're trying to do is create the skeleton, or you could imagine the scaffolding, or the basic elements of your argument. Why are you doing this? So I think the outline can be a challenge. Sometimes it feels like we're just doing an outline to do an outline. I want to give you 4 reasons why I'm requiring you to do an outline. So the first one, doing an outline is going to help you organize your ideas before you sit down to write. You're going to be required to list everything you want to say. And this doesn't mean that you're committed entirely to these ideas. You may change the ideas once you start writing, but the process of organizing them before you sit down to write is going to help make sure that you have a strong argument. And it's also going to help you think. 2, putting together a detailed outline will help make gaps and problems visible. So I've often had the experience of working with students in say, the writing center. They come to meet with me and they have a 12-page paper and they're struggling because something's wrong with it and they can't figure out what. When you have a completed paper or a completed project, it becomes really difficult to figure out exactly where you've gone wrong. So sometimes you end up having to throw it out and start fresh. If you start with an outline, whether it's for a paper, a presentation, a larger project, you'll be able to see any gaps in the logic of your organization more readily because you're not going to have a ton of text. Everything isn't built yet. So if you can imagine, if you're building a house, if you have a completed house and one side of it is sagging, it might take you a long time. You might need a professional, a structural engineer to figure out what happened. But I guarantee you, if all you have up is the studs, and then you see in one corner that a bunch of them are missing, you're going to know what the problem is. Same idea with an outline. So I mentioned the professional. Putting together a good outline now is going to enable me to give you effective feedback. It's going to help potentially classmates or friends give you effective feedback, and therefore it's going to make revision much easier for you. Finally, since you're using sources for your papers, the outline is going to require you to look at your texts and figure out what is out there. So another big challenge students often have is they've put together the argument they want to make. They've really committed to that argument, and then they do some research and they find out they were wrong. They can't prove it. So by sort of setting a hypothesis, giving yourself a thesis, this is what I want to argue, and then collecting the research, the actual research for the outline, you're going to figure out if there are any problems before you've committed to a particular line of thinking. So let's talk quickly about the how. I want to highlight the things you really need to have. These are non-negotiable. They must be in a good planning outline, a good pre-writing outline. You have to have your thesis and subclaims. It makes sense, right? The thesis is your blueprint for the argument. So if you don't have a blueprint, you've just got a bunch of 2x4s, you're just throwing them together and seeing what happens. You got to have a thesis. From that thesis, you're going to develop as best as you can statements of each subclaim or main idea you want to develop. I know a lot of times we like to put just a topic. So I will talk about dog breeding. That's okay, but really you want to think about the argument you're making. Because if I have a general idea, I will talk about dog breeding. Geez, that could have a lot of different arguments within it, right? I could talk about the process of it. I could make an argument about how people breed dogs. I could look at the biological roots, right? We could go back to Gregor Mendel and talk about how we figured out we could breed things. There's a lot of different ways I could take that. So if I'm not super specific, I'm not going to help myself very much. Finally, this is really important. You need specific supporting evidence. So if you've got your main idea and then you just say, I'm going to find evidence, that is not helpful. What you need instead is the specific evidence from your research. Quotations, paraphrases, statistics, the actual stuff you're going to use. So if you do all of this, you're going to find writer's block, rambling digressions where you go on for half of your paper about a random topic that you didn't plan to talk about. That terrifying moment when you have a paper due in 30 minutes and you still need to write half of it. Those are mostly going to disappear with a good outline. Not entirely, but you're going to significantly reduce the possibility and really the degree to which you face those problems. Thanks for listening.